now what it's doing, it's just spinning that rear wheel on the front left. And yeah, we're not getting anywhere. So, and it's giving us a driver inattention warning as well, which is kind of useless. G'day, I'm Paul. One of the most hotly anticipated car launches this year has been this. It is the next generation LandCruiser Prado. It's just called the LandCruiser in the States, but here in Australia it carries on with that Prado name. This shares a platform with the 300 series LandCruiser, and I'll run you through the pros and cons of that a little bit later on. This spec here is the Altitude, one down from the top spec, which is called the Kakadu in Australia. This is priced at, I hope you're sitting down, just under $93,000, which is an incredible sum of money for a car that didn't used to be this expensive. And anyway, but if that is too expensive, the entire range kicks off at around $72,000, which is still a big old chunk of money. And that $72,000 car has like a plastic steering wheel. So it's incredible stuff. But people are lining up for these. There is a long list of people waiting to get their hands on one of these. So today we're going to do a detailed review of this car. We're going to do some light off-roading as well. We're going to do some towing testing later on, and I'll explain why in just a second. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this review, you can use the time codes that are on the screen, or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll down and use the chapters below. Now let's talk about the design. Actually, before I do that, big shout out to the legends at Werribee Toyota. They've loaned us this car. All the press cars are currently in Darwin, which is thousands of kilometers away from us, so we had to get the car from somewhere else. These guys are fantastic. I bought my Supra through them, by the way, and I paid full price before you guys all go jumping up and down about me getting better deals. They were excellent to deal with, so if you are in Melbourne, you want to get a car, go through them. Now, let's talk about the design. Look at this, it is a big old bulge grille, and even though this shares a platform with the 300 series and even stuff like the GX, the LX, it is all on that same platform, same wheelbase, just different designs, different overhangs. This has that quite aggressive sort of Tonka truck look, so big sort of meaty grille here with that sort of cheese grater set up on it. Toyota lettering across the front there, and these horizontal headlights with bi-LED and also matrix LED as well, which I think is cool. LED fog light and a little bit of aero down the bottom here as well. In the States, this is available with a hybrid 4-cylinder petrol engine. For Australia at the moment at least, we're only getting a 2.8 litre diesel. It does have mild hybrid tech that I will run you through when we go for a bit of a drive. It's the same sort of tech they have fitted to the Hilux, which we tested a little while ago. Headlight washers there to blast all the debris off the lights. Now, you remember in our Kia Tasman walkarounds, I mentioned to you that having the lights right on the outboard there is bad news if you are off-roading and you're hitting the side of the car with branches and other sort of debris. This is where most manufacturers will put their headlights for that exact reason. So it's very uncommon to see lights that far out, and this is literally the reason why no one else does it. Now, around the side here, the Altitude comes with some pretty cool looking all-terrain tyres. So these are the same sort of tyres you're going to find on the Lexus GX as well. We tested that in over-trail trim recently, and given that it shares a platform, a lot of these components are sort of carry over from that. Big wheel arch guards here. You've got 4-piston calipers on the brakes there, so hopefully that means this has reasonable stopping power. This is over 200 kilos heavier than the previous generation of this vehicle, so it's a lot more weight that you're moving around. It does have different suspension technology, but we can't see whether that makes much of a difference in terms of handling and the way that it performs on road. This has just a passive suspension setup. You've got VX and Kakadu that actually get adaptive damping and a couple of extra drive modes. This doesn't have that, but it does have a disconnecting sway bar, which I'll run you through when we do some light off-roading. Love these big square chunky mirrors. It's got a piano black finish on the outside there with an indicator off to the side there, and then a camera there for the 360 camera. Side steps. They look a little bit cheap there, so they're sort of a plastic setup that matches the underside here. If you are going to do some serious off-roading, hitting those with rocks is probably going to do a little bit of damage there, but that is something you can fix aftermarket. They have launched this with a stack of accessories and accessory packs as well, so you can actually buy a pack that adds stuff like a nudge bar and snorkel and a couple of other bits and pieces, so you can basically get it all set up at the Toyota dealer. That way the car is ready to go once you walk off the lot. You get privacy glass with the Altitude. You've got these roof racks that extend along the top there. Around the back, back, full LED tail lights. You've got an altitude badge there, Toyota lettering on a piano black finish there on the boot, Prado, and then LandCruiser up the top there. Forgot to mention as well, the bonnet on this is actually aluminium, so pretty easy to lift, but no gas struts, which is a little bit disappointing. Now, let's talk about some of your numbers. So towing capacity, 3.5 tonnes, up on the previous generation of this vehicle. You remove this sort of ungainly looking thing here, and that gives you access to the tow bar. There is no integrated brake controller like you're going to find on Everest, which is a little bit disappointing. It means that you're going to have to spend money after to actually fit all of this stuff if you do want to do any towing. The interesting thing with the weights here though is the GVMs and the GCMs. So GVM 3,100 kilos, GCM 6,600 kilos. So what that basically tells you is you have a curb weight of just over 2,500. You've got a payload of a little under 600 kilos. Now you add 350 kilos to your down ball here, and then you're going to find that you don't really have much payload left to play with. You've only got just under 300 kilos. So you add a couple of adults up the front there, a couple of kids, and you are at your limit if you're towing at 3.5 tonne. So that is just something to keep in mind. If you do want to do some serious towing and you want to do some serious hauling inside the cabin as well, you're going to have to look at a GVM upgrade kit for this before you even set foot, because you can get over your limits pretty quickly. Now, let me know what you reckon about the design. What do you reckon about the price as well? It is quite high compared to the previous generation of this, and in fact it is really close to 300 series at that top end. So be curious to see whether people will simply step up to a 300 series with a V6 diesel, or whether they'd be happy to settle for a 4-cylinder diesel instead. Let me know in the comments section below. Okay, so we are inside the Prado. This is what the key looks like. You've got lock, unlock, boot, Toyota logo, and then LandCruiser on the back. It's a proximity sensing key. You've got a push button start just over here. Now, what do we reckon about this interior? Look, I think it actually doesn't look too bad. It is a bit sort of very dark in here. Like there's just this section that's sort of off color, whereas everything else is just black. Yeah, to me, I don't know, could do with just a couple more different color hues, but you know, it is what it is. For $90,000, do you think it looks premium enough? I think they've gone down the path of using the right materials. Everything sort of feels fairly sort of soft to the touch and premium in that sense. But do you reckon it looks like it's worth 90 grand? Let me know what you reckon in the comments section below. This brings with it a new infotainment system, a screen ahead of the driver. And I mentioned before that this shares a platform with the 300 series. Well, the platform is called the TNGAF. So 300 series, LX, GX, Prado, Tundra. You've got a lot of vehicles on this platform, and in the case of these SUVs, they all share the same wheelbase. So effectively, you're buying a 300 series that has a 4-cylinder diesel instead of a V6. And that's where it becomes a little bit sort of hazy when it gets to Kakadu money, which is over 100 grand on the road. You're getting very close to LandCruiser money. And for LandCruiser money, you're getting a V6 diesel instead of a 4-cylinder. So it kind of makes you wonder whether it is worth just stepping up to the 300 series. But it is worth considering that 300 series will probably get a facelift in line with the LX, and that will bring with it a new infotainment system, because the current one feels pretty dated. So just keep that in mind. If you are cross-shopping them, there will be an update to 300 series at some point, whereas this is the sort of latest setup you can get on this platform. So it also paints Toyota in a bit of a corner, because when the platforms are shared and the only difference is the engine, then all you've got to play with is price. And you know that they'll never fit a V6 diesel to this, because it will cannibalize LandCruiser sales. So I think the best you're going to get here outside of this 4-cylinder diesel is going to be the hybrid petrol. And if they do fit that to Prado, hopefully it'll be available later in 2025. That probably will be a nice little compromise and a good step between the petrol hybrid and the V6 diesel in the LandCruiser, or the big boy LandCruiser. Now let's talk about your touch points. So soft in the center there, nice and soft on the door as well. How soft are they? We've got our durometer. We've tested the main surfaces in this cabin. If you do want to see how this car compares to others that we've tested before, have a look at the link in the description below. Build quality. What is it like? A little bit shaky in the center there, but the rest of this feels pretty solid. That's what our door slam sounds like. Little rattle there with the window open. I'll try that once more. That's better. Now, let's talk infotainment. So you've got two 12.3-inch displays, this one over here and then one ahead of the driver. The entire range comes with this screen, but the screen ahead of the driver only hops up to the bigger screen as you get to the top of the Prado range. This is actually a really good infotainment system. So you've got inbuilt satellite navigation. This sort of first debuted in the Lexus range. This is connected as well, which means you can log into the car using your phone. You can also make emergency calls as well with this SOS button up the top here. So if you do run into any dramas or have a car accident or need some assistance, that is always connected. It doesn't need your phone connected to the car, which is definitely a good thing. On the sound system front, you've got AM, FM, and DAB digital radio, 14-speaker JBL branded sound system. Really good sound system. Got a lot of kick to it, which is nice. In addition to all of that, you've got smartphone mirroring that's wireless, so Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Nice and crisp and sharp there. That works really well. This is what Android Auto looks like. So again, full screen, nice and quick and sharp and all that sort of stuff, which is good news. Now, screen ahead of the driver, 12.3-inch display as well. You control it here using your steering wheel controls. A lot of different screens and other sort of stuff like that. It can get a little bit complicated, but I think once you get the hang of it, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now here, this little thing. So this is a camera for the driver attention monitor. We're going to test that a little bit later on when we go onto the bowl as well. Now let's talk safety tech. So you've got autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection. You've got this auto-dimming rear vision mirror, but also a digital rear view mirror as well. So it helps improve visibility. Not an issue here with 5 seats, but if you do have the 7 seats, it means you're not really sort of battling with kids' heads and stuff in the third row. You've got blind spot monitoring built into the wing mirror. You've got front and rear parking sensors, rear cross traffic alert, front cross traffic alert. So fully sort of kitted out there in terms of those safety features. Radar cruise control, the lane tracing assistant, which we will test a little bit later on. And then a 360 camera. I'll show you what that looks like. So you've got this sort of terrain view where it gives you a sweep around the vehicle. And as you drive, it will basically replicate what is happening in front of the car underneath it. So you can drive over obstacles and stuff like that. I'll show you that when we go off-road, but this is what the actual reverse view camera looks like. So pretty sharp and clear there. And then you've got other sort of wider angles you can go with as well, and then a top-down view also. And this is what the horn sounds like. Now let's chat about practicality, and we'll start off with your connectivity. So you've got 3 USB-C ports down the front here with a HDMI port. They love a HDMI port. Do you know anyone that has used a HDMI device inside a car before? Let me know in the comments section. Got a wireless phone charger up the top here, a couple of cup holders there. Now, in terms of additional storage, this is your center console. Whether you like it or not, you get a cool box. It is basically a refrigeration unit for the center. Not very big, so I really don't know what you're going to fit in there. You can fit a bottle in there or a couple of bottles maybe, but it's not exactly a huge space. So I don't know whether you just prefer to have storage in there instead, but anyway, up to you guys. You've got storage over here for business cards or parking passes, and then you've got a glove box down here as well. It's sort of okay sized, not that sort of spacious, but it is what it is. Now on the comfort front, you have dual zone automatic climate control up the front here. You've got heated steering wheel, heated and cooled seats for the front row, which is excellent news. Comfort-wise, on the steering front, you have both tilt and reach adjustment. It is electrically adjustable. Driver and front passenger seat is electrically adjustable as well, so you can go forwards, backwards. Your backrest can go forwards and backwards. Lift the front of the seat, back of the seat. You also have lumbar adjustment and then seat memory as well for the driver. Seats are really comfortable too. They've got this sort of perforated material, which is where the air comes through. They hug you in nicely. Just a great place to be seated for a long distance drive. And on our reach test, let's give this a shot. Yeah, easy to reach, everything on that screen. Now, second row, what's it like? I've got my seat pretty far back here, so I've got a decent amount of knee room. Toe room is not bad. Headroom is reasonable as well. You do have this hump here for the sunroof up the front there. In terms of the rest of the creature comforts here, you've got map pockets in the back of the seats, third zone of climate control, 2 USB-C ports down the bottom there with the 12-volt outlet. You've got air vents up the top here. You've got cup holders here in the center row, 2 ISOFIX points on your outboard seats with 3 top tether points. One of the disappointing things with the TNG AF platform that this is based on is that the second row doesn't slide. So the issue with that is that if you do need more row for a hypothetical third row, this car doesn't have a third row, but if you do need that, you can't slide it forwards and backwards. You're always limited in terms of the leg room you have in the third row. We will have a Kakadu in soon, and we will test that third row out. But for the moment, I think this could be a limiting factor if you want to get adults into the third row. So just something worth keeping in mind. Now, what about our window test? Does it go all the way down? Let's find out. So it's auto up and down. Boom, look at that, goes all the way down. Fantastic. Now let's talk cargo space. So you've got a split tailgate here, so you can open the top to retrieve things from there. This is also where your camera is for that rear view mirror camera, so it's nestled in behind that window. There is a problem though. Have a look at this. This is a big old miss from Toyota, and I really don't understand why they've done, well, I know why they've done this because hybrid, but I don't know why they've left it like this. So Altitude and entry level come with 5 seats. Every other vehicle in the Prado range is 7 seats. Great. But have a look at this boot floor. You look at it and you're like, why is that elevated? Is it for storage? Well, yes, partly. You've got this storage slot here. You've got storage off to the side and then a little bit of storage up the front there as well. This doesn't open though. And the reason is you have your components for the 48-volt mild hybrid system nestled under here. These are the same components you're going to find on a Hilux sitting under the second row, but they put them under here, and that requires this elevation change for the boot. Gets even worse if you're with a 7-seat variant, because the third row sits on top of this. So you have an even higher elevation change from your boot floor, and they've put this sort of dinky storage system in there, and you know, it is removable, but it really just defeats the purpose of having you know, a boot there. So instead of just being all flat, you have these elevation changes as you go. And also Toyota doesn't let you take the third row out. Previous generation of Prado, people would buy like a Kakadu, take the third row out, and then they'd have all this extra space. Well, here you can't actually do that because you're exposing yourself to the 48-volt system. Under here is a lithium-ion battery and also a fan system that basically pulls air from outside the vehicle, cools that hybrid system, and ejects it out the side there. So it is a system that, you know, works fine for the engine application, but it's just bizarre to me that they've chosen that as the location to put it. I think this is a miss from Toyota. I hope it's something they can address, because based on what I've read on the forums, people are pretty disappointed with this, and I just don't think they've really understood the market for this car and the customer correctly, because if you did, you wouldn't be doing this. That is just my opinion. Now, this does mention a 60 kilo weight limit for the board as well. It's unclear if it means just the back section or the entire floor. The other problem as well, if you go for the third row variant, you've got barely any space here behind the third row. In fact, you've got under 200 litres. That is less than a Kluger. Kluger offers more space behind the third row compared to a car that shares its platform with the 300 series. Just seems like a really bizarre thing to have. Now, in addition to that as well, your second row, if you do tumble that out of the way, actually, I'll show you what it looks like with that bag in there first. Shows you how much sort of space you have available. There is still a fair bit of space, but it's this compromise here that I'm not happy with. Off to the side, you've got a 240 or 220 volt outlet with 100 watt output. Not a huge amount, but sort of enough to charge things if you do need to charge them. You've got 2 USB-C outlets and cup holders there as well, which carry over from this being available as a 7-seater. I'm going to show you what it looks like with the second row folded. Now, when I say folded, you can either have it flat like that, where you have that sort of upper section, or you can tumble it forward. So when you tumble it forward, you have just under 2,000 litres of space, but you can see what the issue is here. You've got that flat section that then drops off here. If you have the third row in there as well, it sort of climbs and then drops. It's not really a very useful space, unfortunately. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. Let me know in the comments section below. Is this a problem for you? Would you have taken the third row out? Are you sort of disappointed that you can't use this space properly? Let me know what you reckon in the comments section below. Are you looking for some advice but don't want a hard sell? Well, I am here to help. Well, CarExpert is here to help. All you need to do is go to Google and type in "Help Me CarExpert" or scan the QR code on the screen. It'll take you to our website. CarExpert is a big business. It's not just me here doing videos. We even have a concierge team in Australia who is there to help you figure out which car to buy. We can even put you in touch with one of our friendly dealers as well. It is obligation free. You can talk to someone in Australia who will guide you through the entire process. You can talk to my mate Pete or even Sophia. All you need to do is just Google "Help Me CarExpert" or use the QR code, and we will hook you up with the right car. Okay, so we've just hit the road in the Prado. Now, I mentioned before, this is available with a number of engines overseas, but for the Australian market, we only get one engine, 2.8 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder diesel, 150 kilowatts of power, 500 Newton meters of torque. It is the same engine you're going to find in the V-Active Hilux, which is Toyota's mild hybrid setup. It's interesting because it uses a 48 volt battery system and a DC to DC converter. And what that basically means is it has 48 volts electric system, and then it's able to use that 48 volt electric system to power the vehicle when it's off. And that's important because a lot of those systems are high current systems. Some of them work on 12 volts, but some can operate on 48 volts. It means the car can be switched off and everything sort of still remains running. And I'll show you what it feels like when we come to a stop. One of the best parts about this is how smooth it is when it restarts. So come to a complete stop here, keep my foot on the pedal, kills the car. When I release off the brake pedal, it's almost imperceptible. It just kicks on and it's ready to go. Provides you torque as well when it's ready to go as well. And part of that 48 volt system is a starter generator that can actually provide engine torque. So I'm talking about 8 kilowatts, 65 Newton meters while it has some charge in the battery. And that means that you are getting that little bit of extra push while the turbos are spooling. Now, what does all that feel like behind the wheel? We'll give it a little kick here. Yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie, it is very leisurely. We are carrying over 2.5 tons of curb mass. Throw a few passengers in, try and tow something, it is going to start feeling pretty sluggish pretty quickly. But the gearbox is nice. You've got an 8-speed auto now instead of the 6-speed, and you do have that sort of torque gap being filled with the 48 volt system as well on occasion. So it's not sort of the end of the world, but it doesn't feel all that punchy. And with that 48 volt system, it charges every time you slow down. So as you let off the throttle, you actually feel it sort of slowing down a little bit and giving you that bit of extra charge. And you actually have a meter here as well that shows you what it's doing. So you can see they're getting power, and then if I roll out of the throttle and onto the brake, it'll go into that charge mode. So pretty good setup. Not like a proper hybrid. It can't actually run the vehicle with the engine switched off, as in movement, but it will provide you that little bit of assistance when you need it. So what does all that mean in terms of fuel economy? Well, it's meant to be around 7 litres per 100 Ks, but we're seeing a figure of closer to 9. That includes a bit of highway driving as well. This car is virtually brand new, so it's still sort of being run in. So that figure is going to be higher. Hopefully it does settle closer to that 7 mark. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a much heavier vehicle than the previous generation of this. The whole platform's bigger, everything is bigger about it, and as a result of that, it's carrying over 200 kilos of extra weight. Given that this is a carryover engine over the last generation without that mild hybrid system, I'll be curious to see when we do some of our performance testing whether it still has the poke that the 500 Newton meters provided the Prado when the upgrade came, or whether it is starting to feel a bit slower thanks to it carrying that extra weight. One of the other steps back as well, in addition to this being heavier, it now has a smaller fuel tank, so the spare tyre is nestled in under the rear of the vehicle. So that means the fuel tank goes from 150 litres to 110 litres, and that's split across an 80 litre main tank and a 30 litre sub tank. You can't switch between those two tanks, it's just a single sort of setup when you're fueling, but that is going to mean that you are going to have to stop a little more often than the previous generation of this car. You're still getting an incredible amount of range, about 1,000 Ks out of a tank, which really isn't anything sort of too bad in my opinion. Now let's talk about AdBlue. I'm going to make that appear on the right-hand side of the screen here. So you actually have a little tank display there. Let me just scroll through and find it. A couple of off-road menus there. There's your AdBlue. So it's a 17-litre tank that you're going to need to fill. Well, a few petrol stations have it. Your Toyota dealership will have it as well. 1 litre of AdBlue will get you 500 Ks of driving. So 17 litres gives you about 8,500 Ks of driving before you need to fill that up again. And what is AdBlue, I hear you asking? Well, this has a diesel particulate filter that cycles itself every 100 to 300 kilometres, but it mixes exhaust gases with this AdBlue product to then reduce the amount of emissions you have coming out of your exhaust. So that's the whole concept, making your car greener as you drive. Now let's talk about the ride. So this doesn't get adaptive damping, and I'll be curious to see now as we go over our sine waves at 130, which is the maximum speed limit in Australia, the speed you'll be doing when you're overtaking. If you hit consecutive bumps, what does it actually feel like behind the wheel, and what is body control like? So there's 130. All right. Yeah, it's got a bit of a bounce to it. The vehicles with adaptive damping are going to cope better with that, but this is sort of right there at the limit where you want it to be. Any softer and it would really have a lack of body control at that top end, and any firmer it would be quite uncomfortable. Driving sort of in and around town, this is actually quite a comfortable setup and doesn't really feel like you're driving sort of anything too soft or anything too firm. It really is sort of nicely balanced there, and a lot of that comes down to those all-terrains as well that have a fair bit of side profile on them. It's time for our bouncy, terrible potholed corrugated road. do this at 90 k's an hour just to see what the ride feels like if you're going to be going across corrugations. So you can hear in my voice, it does sound like it's sort of bouncing around a little bit. Here's our condensed sine wave. Shaking the living daylights out of the car, but it is really comfortable. It's actually, yeah, the seat feels good, the sort of suspension feels good as well. So I think if you were going to be hitting some of those corrugations up north, this is going to feel really nice and comfortable behind the wheel. Now, what about your visibility? So I can see clearly down the front of the car there, those bonnet ridges sort of help sort of guide your eyes down the front of the vehicle. The wing mirrors are really nice and big there too. Visibility out the back's great. You've got that digital mirror and also just your normal mirror if you need it, which is great. And then the 360 camera for parking too. Let's talk about road noise. There's a little bit of road noise that comes in from the tyres, but there's also a bit of wind noise as well that I noticed. And this doesn't have a snorkel fitted, so it's a bit strange that there is wind noise at highway speeds, and you will notice the tyres noisiest on a coarse chip surface. This is how it went when we put it up against our calibrated sound meter. Now let's talk about your drive mode. So you've got a mode selector here. I mentioned before that your adaptive suspension vehicles have a couple of extra settings there, but we just have Sport, Normal and Eco for on-road. I'll run you through the off-road ones later on. Popped it into Sport. Let's go for a little rip around the track here. Yes, this is not a sports car, but we test all of our cars back to back in the same way to see what they're like when they're sort of pushed closer to their limits. The brakes feel nice and strong. A fair bit of body roll there. Bit of squeal from the tyres as well, just given that they are all-terrains. Yeah, you really do feel this is quite sort of sluggish compared to previous generation car. Like, it's not terrible, but it does not feel like it has the same amount of punch. So it's only sort of Igor and I in the car at the moment. So yeah, look, the body roll's not sort of that bad. It's got a stabiliser bar at the front and the rear. The front can be disconnected when you're off-road, and that sort of gives it the ability to sit slightly flatter on the road here. But yeah, it's sort of just not picking up a huge amount of pace, and it's probably something you're going to notice the most when you're doing things like overtaking and then trying to get up and move. But back straight, we'll see what it's like up along here. Just in terms of your split between the front and rear axle, you've got 40% of torque to the front, 60% to the rear, but it can go up to just over 70% to the rear axle if required. So yeah, look, dynamically it's fine. It's nowhere near as sort of agile as something like an Everest, and it really doesn't have as much punch as I thought it would. That extra weight over the previous generation really feels like it has slowed it down a bit. Okay, time to test our semi-autonomous system. So we're going to be using the 3 outer lanes of our bowl here. We engage radar cruise control with the lane tracing assistant to kind of just center the vehicle and see how it performs. So do that at 70 k's an hour. There it is there. So you switch this feature on by pressing that, and then it comes up with a little steering wheel icon and it goes green. I should actually mention as well, it does have a head-up display, but it is blurry. I don't know if it's just my vision or whatever it is, but it seems just a little bit blurry. But anyway, we're active now in this lane. It's doing a pretty decent job there. I'll jump up to the next lane. See what it's like up here. It's gone green again. Nice, that is holding us basically dead center in that lane, which is really cool to see. Try our outermost lane now. This is one that most cars will struggle in because you have to apply the most amount of steering torque. Oh, look at that. It's basically holding us up here quite central to the lane there. So just shows you that on the open road, it's going to be willing to input as much steering as you need, which is cool. Now, the driver attention monitor, this little thing here. So it has a feature where apparently if you stop responding, it will stop the vehicle. So I'm going to set this back to 70 k's an hour, and Igor's going to be looking out the front window. This is safe, controlled conditions, but I just want to see what happens when we're no longer looking. No, Igor, you need to look. Just kidding, he's looking. We just need to see what happens when this expires and what happens to the vehicle. A lot of beeping. So this is simulating you basically passing out and, not being able to control the vehicle. Oh, here we go. It's beeping. I can feel it slowing down. Let's just see what it does. It's put the hazard lights on now as well. Oh wow, that's cool. Okay, it's slowing down a bit more. Let's see if it comes to a complete stop. Oh wow, that is so cool. So, it's come to a complete stop. Oh, it's unlocked the doors as well. Wow, that's cool. And it's applied the emergency park brake too. That is amazing. So that tech is there in case you have a medical emergency behind the wheel. It's able to safely stop the vehicle, and it kept us in the lane going around as well. So it's pretty unreal. Very cool technology. Okay, time to do some performance testing. This will really just give us an idea of how this compares to the previous generation of Prado, because we've done a 0 to 100 with that and also an 80 to 120 with that before. It's part of our big SUV mega test, so you can watch that by clicking up there. So I'm going to turn traction control off. I'm going to pop this into sport mode. Just going to dial up some revs, and then we'll see what happens. I'm really curious to see how this goes. So here we go. It's interesting, the hybrid system is only pulsing torque every now and then in between gear changes. All right, there's 90, 100, we'll go through to 120, we're running out of space. All right, there's 120. Come to a stop. Wow, it took a while to get there. So 0 to 100, 11.47. Now, how does that compare to the last one? Okay, so it is slower than the previous generation Prado. The last one we tested was 11.38. This was 11.47 for 0 to 100. And then for 80 to 120, 8.68 seconds for the new one, 8.28 for the old one. Yeah, so new car, heavier and slower. Not really a good start in my opinion, but yeah, that is what it is. And this isn't even the top spec. The Kakadu in the new generation of car with the third row weighs heavier than this, so it's going to be slower again. That's pretty disappointing. So, all right, let's go back and do a stop from 100 k's an hour. So this is to see what our brake and tyre package is like. We're stopping from 100 k's an hour to 0. It's there. Okie dokie. So that looks, so 100 to 0, 3.04 seconds. 42.16 metres, so okay, but not amazing. You sort of want something between that 35 and 45 metre range. That is okay. If you do want to see how this car compares to others that we've tested before in terms of acceleration and braking and all that sort of stuff, have a look at the link in the description below. Now, how quick does it go in reverse? Let's find out. Here we go. Look at that. 53 kilometres an hour, not too bad. Okie dokie, time to do some light off-roading. I'll run you through the specs and what we're going to do today. This is not a hardcore course. This is just a very basic light off-road course that anyone can really do, and it'll just give us a good idea of what the fundamentals of this are like and what the traction controls are like and just some of the controls that we have access to. So in terms of the spec, 700mm wading depth, you have a ground clearance of 221mm, approach angle of 32 degrees, which is the angle of the face you can approach before you hit the front of the car, and a departure angle of 17 degrees, which is the same but in reverse. You've got a front stabiliser disconnect. So the stabiliser bars on the front and rear are designed to hold the body flat when the car is going through corners. They're kind of like a torsion beam in that sense, but they do limit the amount of wheel articulation you can get. And Toyota actually created a system called KDSS. Well, they worked with an Australian company to come up with that system, and KDSS allowed the vehicle to use a system where it could basically effectively disconnect the sway bar and give you more wheel articulation while another wheel was compressed. Well, that system's now gone and they've got this instead. They do have, strangely, eKDSS on the GX, which shares a platform with this. So by pressing this button here, it actually disconnects the front sway bar to give you more wheel articulation. On the rear, though, this has a rear diff lock, which is the only spec in the entire Prado range, strangely, that has a rear diff lock. The rest of them just must have a center diff lock, which is actually a torsion center differential. You've also got a multi-terrain selector, so by clicking on that, you use the mode select button to switch between deep snow, mud, sand, dirt, and auto, and then you have a crawl control and a downhill assist function as well. Oh, and I should mention as well that it is a full-time four-wheel drive, and you also have low-range four-wheel drive available as well. So we're going to start off on our basic offset mogul. This is designed to kick the rear wheel up, just to give us an idea of what traction controls are like. I've left the multi-terrain system in auto, which is basically managing traction controls on our behalf, and it will figure out what it needs to do for us. So I'll drop this front wheel in here and then wait for the rear wheel to drop in as well, so it's lifted off the ground. A little bit further in, which is that spot just there. So we're sort of teetering at the moment. The rear wheel is just off the ground there. That is a lot of wheel articulation. They're actually saying that with the front sway bar disconnect, you can actually get 10% more wheel articulation than you could with the KDSS system in the previous generation of the Prado, which is pretty good. So what I'll do now is just lean onto the throttle. I've left traction control on. We'll let the multi-terrain system figure out what it needs to do. So I can feel traction control biting, and you can actually see it flashing just there. Go a little harder on the throttle now. Yeah, so despite it being in auto, it's not really too keen on getting us across this. All right, I might just try switching traction control off. We'll just see how that goes. So now what it's doing, it's just spinning that rear wheel on the front left. And yeah, we're not getting anywhere. So, and it's giving us a driver and attention warning as well, which is kind of useless. Okay, so what I'll do now, I might just try select a different mode here. I might just try, I don't know, dirt, I guess. We'll see if that makes any difference here to the traction control. So it is limiting that wheel slip a little there, but it's still not getting us over what is a pretty basic obstacle, if I'm honest. Yeah, okay, that's pretty disappointing. Okay, so I guess, yeah, I guess the only option we have here is to lock a diff to get over this. So let me just see. Okay, so rear diff lock doesn't work in four-wheel drive high range. Center diff lock does. So I've just hit that button, waiting for that to lock. Still waiting. There we go. Okay, it's locked now. Just roll onto that throttle. There we go. So that's got us over straight away pretty much. Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised by that. I would have thought that just, you know, basic traction control could sort that out. It's just one wheel off the ground. It's a full-time four-wheel drive. I mean, we've driven two-wheel drives here that get over that with just traction control running. So, yeah, it's a little bit odd. Okay, so we're going to go back over the obstacle. This time around, we're resting up against a concrete block, and we're going to have the front wheel slightly off the ground and then the rear wheel slightly lifted as well. And it'll just, again, force it into a situation where it needs to rely on its differential lock to get things moving. I mean, there is so much articulation there that we're not really even going to have much wheel slip on the rear. So I'll just sort of lean into this and see how we go. Yeah, absolutely no drama. So you can see there is so much articulation on that rear wheel that the big all-terrain is just clawing into the ground and getting us over there without any dramas at all. What we might try and do, I'll just turn around and just see if the front sway bar disconnect helps us at all as we go over that obstacle. So I'll go back over that obstacle. One push of that disconnects that sway bar. It automatically connects again at 30 k's an hour in case you forget to do it. Okay, so we're going over the obstacle again. The center diff is unlocked. I've just got the front sway bar disconnected. In theory, it should mean that that tyre actually has just a little bit more articulation, and then it should have contact with the road while the rear one is off the ground. So there's the rear one off the ground there. And I'll just lean onto the throttle now. Yeah, look at that. That makes all the difference. So even with that rear wheel off the ground a little bit there, you're able to get just that bit more articulation on the front. So it means you've got traction there. You've got a little bit more traction there as well because the body's more level. And it really does make a difference. And that is something you just do at the push of a button. So it does show you traction control systems are great, but old school stuff like this helps massively. So very impressed with that sway bar disconnect. Now, time to try our hill. So we do this in low range. So you got to switch it over to neutral, flick the switch down here to low range, wait for that to engage. It comes up telling you that stability control is switched off. What I'll also do is lock the center and rear diffs. So I'll wait for that to engage, and then we should have access to a couple of other modes here. So rock, mud, sand, auto. So I'm just going to leave it on auto. I'm still waiting for that center and rear diff to lock. All right, and still waiting. Gee, it's taking a while. I just don't understand how this stuff takes so long. In Everest, you just press it and it just does stuff, whereas here I'm still waiting for this. There we go. Okay, it's running now. So what I'm going to do is climb up here with constant throttle to start with. Then what I'll do is come back again, come to a stop and check the hill hold and then just see how it takes off. Should be good with these chunky all-terrains. And I've got the traction monitor visible there as well, so it'll tell us if we're losing traction at all. Yeah, look, it feels like an absolute piece of cake coming up here. Oh no, there we go. A little bit of traction loss there. You can see that flashing in front of us, but no dramas at all. Gets us up there without any problems. So that is an impressive setup. Got our little mud bath here. Drop it through that. The other cool function here as well is our cameras. So I'm going to be going over the end here, which is our descent. So it gives us a really good view of how that's going. Gives us our pitch and roll angles. You've also got the crawl control feature. This allows you to set the speed using this dial here, and that will manage basically ascent or descent without sort of going too fast or too slow. And I love that feature because it gives you control over the speed. Some of the SUVs in this segment don't let you control descent speed. And as a result of that, you just, you could be going a million miles an hour and not really know what it's doing. Whereas this, I can visually see exactly what's going on and it just works. Okay, back on our hill this time. I'm going to come to a stop, check to see if we have a hill hold function, and then get back onto the throttle. So get it up here, come up to a stop around there somewhere, let go of the brake, see how that feels. Yeah, that's holding us, and then onto the throttle. A little bit of wheel slip there, but traction control is doing a really good job of just getting us up without any dramas at all. So yeah, very impressive. So once you actually get it into low range and just get out of those sort of pretty basic modes, it actually is quite capable. It's just when it's in that sort of normal setting that it just seems to confuse itself a bit. Now, last thing we're going to try here is rocks. So I'll put this into rock mode and we'll just see how that goes. I'm going to leave the center and rear diff locked and I'll just ride the brake with the throttle. We'll see how it all feels. All right, here we go. Yeah, very nice. Very carefree. Actually, halfway through, I might even just disconnect this sway bar and see what that feels like. Okay, here we go. So that's now disconnected. Don't feel a huge difference, but feels a little softer. Yeah, but either way, this rock mode is definitely helping with throttle response and just making sure we don't get flaring of the throttle. I'm able to sort of just have a bit of consistency with that throttle pedal. So very nice. All right, so what do we think about the LandCruiser Prado? Look, let's just quickly summarize four-wheel drive stuff first. Once it's all switched into the sort of more advanced settings, it will go anywhere, and I think that that's how it's been engineered to work, but it's just a little bit disappointing that traction control can't do basic stuff like that terrain there. You don't want to have to be going through and locking diffs and doing all that sort of stuff, because as you can see, the diffs took a little while to lock there, so yeah, I think they could definitely speed that stuff up. Just in general though, with this car, it is a big step up in price. I think they could have done much better with the boot there. The boot is just a really average setup, and I think that they really didn't put much effort into that. They went, okay, we need a 48 volt system, let's just whack it under there and then not think about what customers actually use the vehicle for. And finally, as well with the engine, come on Toyota, you could have just done a little bit more than that. It is slower than the old one, and you can't release a new generation of a car and have it worse in terms of its performance, and I just think that's a bit of a cop-out. So let me know what you reckon in the comments section below. Thank you again to Werribee Toyota for loaning us this vehicle. We are going to get a Kakadu in. We're going to do some tow testing and some proper stuff with that as well. So let me know in the comments section below what you want us to do in addition to what we've done today. And if you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like it and you share it with your mates. But until next time, take it easy.